on resilience. I have a few things to share here. It's just that I'm not very certain about screen sharing, but I'm going to try. Yeah. Okay. Let me close this and start again. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe.
Let's see if this works. Let's see if this works. Yes. Okay. Is everybody seeing something about resilience? Is anybody getting something about resilience?
It's coming up.
Not
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah, it's coming.
It's loading.
Ah, it's loading. Okay, very good. Very good. All right. Just some quick definitions. The capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, which translates in a single word to toughness. The ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape, which is elasticity. I think for our purposes, these definitions are accurate to some degree, but not adequate, because we're not speaking of substances on one hand, and two, it's not just in difficulties that resilience shows. Resilience is one of the most fundamental qualities for successful leadership. It involves being flexible and yet firm. It involves maintaining focus on one's goal and yet being able to move and bend with the wind rather than break when under pressure. So I just use these dictionary definitions as a kind of starter. The concept of resilience we're speaking about here is much more embracing. It embraces the whole field of human existence and is more than just toughness or elasticity. And I hope to demonstrate that as we go along. But first, I would like us to sort of put in simple focus aspects of human nature. We have being, that is how we are, what we are. And of course, there's the doing side. Now, I'm sure most of you will accept that in life currently, especially in business, in the world of achievement, doing matters a lot more than being. What you can do, performance is what most people focus on. Performance is measured, people are tasked to achieve certain ends, certain targets. It's all about the doing and very little about being. I was speaking with a very successful entrepreneur once, and she said to me, I'm more interested in hiring people for character and teaching them skills than in hiring people for their skills and then trying to teach them character. So she was saying that she was more interested in the being in the first place. And of course, she was talking about relatively young hires rather than in the doing. So for more clarity, being involves vision, the sense of purpose, the sense of identity of who you are, the sense of beliefs and values, what drives you, your why, what motivates you, what's important to you. Whereas doing is more about capabilities, more about your actions and your reactions, and also about your environment, the constraints and the opportunities that are within it. Now, as coaches, I think that we, in a particular way, are leaders. We have to lead, but not lead in an organizational sense of being a boss and giving instructions and orders, not leading in a directive sense, in the sense of doing, but leading more in the sense of being. Years back, one of the courses I went to, somebody made something abundant, the course leader, the seminar leader, made something abundantly clear. He said, you can only be as good a coach as you are a human being. And I don't think he meant this strictly in the moral sense, but he meant it more in the sense of self-discipline, in the sense of finding some peace within, in the sense of being exemplary, not so much in what you do, but rather in how you are. And I have honestly found that to be completely true in my experience. I found that that was the big limit to the effectiveness of my coaching. It all had to do with my being. And so if I wanted to help my coachees to a place of calmness, a place of reflection, retrospection, insight, I had to go there myself first. And so I realized that being a coach, with all the training I have received and I will continue to receive, that wasn't enough. I had to embody the values that I'm hoping will be able to support quietly my coachees. In other words, I have to act a bit like a magnet does to a steel or iron bar. It doesn't instruct or force the piece of steel or iron to be a magnet. It induces it in the steel or the iron bar. So there are those two aspects of our nature which we as coaches need to manage. And we especially best manage them by being as exemplary as we can be in the circumstances. So we have to take our own medicine, but more of that later. So doing is what modern business, modern performance mostly focuses on. And being is a kind of gray area where people can just do what they want. And in many approaches, it's not even taken as being important at all. But from my experience, and I do believe from yours, you found that being is what limits doing. If you can't be the best of yourself, if you cannot bring the best of yourself forward, then that's going to limit what you are capable of doing. Because these capabilities, as I'm hoping to show as we go along, these actions and the environmental constraints and opportunities are all limited and controlled by our beliefs and values, our sense of identity, and our vision and purpose in life. So I believe that as a coach, you need to focus on both areas. First of all, putting emphasis on the being and on the doing. On the being, I think the high value is connection. And on the doing, I think the high value, the operating value there is balance. And I'll explain these two special qualities as we go along. Now, let me speak a little bit more about being and doing, but now we're going to sort of relate them to each other hierarchically. This is the area of doing, the area of environment, of behavior actions, and of our capabilities. That's the area that we normally engage in our daily lives. This is the area that we tend to leave out, the beliefs and values, or not leave out completely, but not insufficiently engage. the area of identity, who is doing what, and the area of vision and purpose. Now, how do we engage these areas in a way that becomes relevant to resilience? There needs to be balance in them, but also, very importantly, connection. And I want to show how balance and connection come in. On one hand, we have ego. That's the nexus, or the plexus, pardon me, of our desires, of who we think we are, of our ambitions, to some extent of our aspirations for ourselves. Ego. Now, ego in modern parlance is mostly a bad word. We speak of ego-centered people. We speak of people's big egos. People like to talk of the male ego and negative connotations like that. But is ego really unnatural or unhealthy? I challenge you to find the most valuable and most interesting people in your life. You will find that they always had a well-developed ego. But an ego that is balanced and kept in check. By what? By spirit. Now, I don't want to get too metaphysical here about spirit. And let's just say spirit is that aspiring part of the human being that wishes to contribute, that is relatively selfless, that wishes to enrich, uplift, and even bless its environment and all those in it. And so the healthiest human beings, the soundest, those that are the most successful in a sustained way, and therefore those who are the most resilient, have a balance between ego and spirit. Ego involves our ambition and the role we're going to play, status. Who doesn't want to be the top dog? The permission that we give ourselves from our beliefs and values, the strategies and mental maps we're going to use to navigate our journey, our reaction to happenings that take place in our environment, and the constraints that we meet there. Spirit involves our vision. It involves what we desire for a better world. It involves our sense of mission, our motivation, the energy that we bring into accomplishing our outcomes, our proaction, our capacity to be proactive, and of course, the opportunities. Resilience is an outcome of a solid, stable balance between ego and spirit. If we are, and pardon the term, too spiritual, we have so much vision, we're consumed by a sense of mission to work for others, we're motivated, we have the energy, proaction, opportunities, we will very likely go hungry and not be able to sustain that vision, that desire to contribute. If, on the other hand, we're too ego-driven, caught up by our ambition, caught up in the role and the status, who we are within the society or within the organization, then the tendency is that we work for ourselves, we sever ourselves from our surrounding context, and we lose, we crash. Sustainability comes as a result of a harmonious, dynamic balance between both ego and spirit. And so what we are looking to engender in those whose growth as human beings we support are strong, healthy egos balanced by a strong sense of vision, a desire to contribute, a selflessness, an aspiration to ennoble, help, and uplift others. One cannot do without the other. Resilience, as I said, is the outcome of these. So let's see what happens when, at all these levels I have mentioned, we lack resilience. This is an almost trite description for the world we live in now. VUCA, the American military term for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. This has now been lifted to exponential levels by the current happening. When our behavior, when we are without resilience, even in a peaceful, calm situation, our behavior is characterized by agitation, reactivity, impracticality. We tend to be unrealistic and absent-minded, usually when we are stressed and under pressure. And stress being highly subjective, it could be something like a little argument with a friend could put us in this state, or a collapse of our finances, or illness of a loved one or a friend. Anything could cause this. When we are without resilience and under stress, our capabilities are challenged. And these are all at the level of doing, mind you. We become emotionally insensitive. We tend to be negative. We allow our health to run down, and we tend to get isolated socially. At the level of being, our beliefs and values become challenged. We tend to fall into a fixed mindset, a fixed idea of who we are and who we should be. We tend to be sensitive and focused on the possibility of failure, rather than regarding setbacks and experiences more as feedback. We have the life sucks, people suck attitude, and other disempowering presuppositions, fear and insecurity. Oops, sorry. And then at the level of identity, it's clear. This hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness are the three characteristics of unhappiness, related to low self-esteem, a sense of purposelessness, and a sense of being a victim. And finally, at the level of vision, at the level of vision, at the level of our higher constituency, we feel alone and unconnected. And how does this reflect on our state? Now, let me say, before we go on, let me say something about state. Performance is state-based. State is the state of our being. When our being is calm, resourceful, energized, then we can achieve the highest performance in a sustained way. When our being is challenged without resilience, as described here, then performance goes down. So doing, as I said earlier, depends so much on being. We call this a crash state, characterized by these vulnerability, fragility, rigidity, weakness, the fear of death. CRASH is an acronym for contraction, reaction, analysis, paralysis, separation, hurt, and hatred. And if you think about that, we are more familiar with this in ourselves and in others than we would really like to be. And these traits very accurately characterize what happens when we are without resilience. Now, what happens when we are with resilience? At the level of doing in the environment, it's still volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, but our behavior, our actions reflect a certain calmness, proactivity, practicality, pragmatism, and present-mindedness. Our capabilities emerge from emotional intelligence, positive mental attitude, good physical health, and social connection. At the level of being, we have a growth mindset, which enables us, as opposed to the fixed mindset, to be in a learning state, whereby setbacks we regard not as failures, but as feedback, which enables us to make useful, meaningful course adjustments. Every experience has a positive intention. We're always looking for the gift, even in the most unpleasant of experiences. And we're anchored well in love and courage, which help us grow out of the undue fear of death. At the level of identity, we see ourselves as a hero on a journey. We have an empowered self-image and, most importantly, a sense of purpose. And looking up to the level of vision, to our higher constituency, to that which we serve, we recognize it, we feel a sense of ever-growing gratitude towards it. And from this emerges a powerful spirit of community that connects us to all around us. And this is characterized by what we call a coach state. The coach state has resilience. It's a container for resilience, for durability, for toughness, grit, adaptability, bounce back ability. And it's an acronym for being centered, for being open, for attending with awareness, for being connected, and for holding. Holding not only ourselves, but holding a space of calmness, of aspiration, in which our clients can feel safe to open up and to begin with their growth, their personal growth. We'll come to this in a moment. So, for me, being a coach is about living the values, walking the talk, being centered, open, attending with awareness, with respect, focusing on our clients, being connected vitally, and holding. And let me dwell a bit on connection, because I mentioned that earlier, under being, and balance, under doing. Studies on longevity, pardon me, have come up with the fact that the greatest factor to living longevity. I said longevity, excuse me, longevity. Studies on longevity have come up with the fact that the greatest single factor that supports long life is not good health, as one would think it, not wealth, as some would think, but connection, connectedness, social connectedness, connectedness to nature, and perhaps a sense of connectedness to the universe, and of course, its maker. And it is that sense of connectedness that acts like a web that supports, upholds, nurtures the individual through thick and thin. And this has been found to be the greatest support in longevity. Also, when people are connected, when they have a strong sense of being, which is founded on connection, then they have a balanced sense of doing. They don't do too much because they know that that can be counterproductive and can erode their being. And they don't do too little because they know that they have to support their being with activity, with a proper active expression of their aspirations and of their contribution. So what characterizes sound being is connectedness. And what characterizes sound doing is balance. Now, let's go a little further to bring that home to the practice of coaching. The question of resilience comes up mostly when people are in problems, when they're in a problem thinking state. And a problem thinking state is characterized by a strong sense of the present state, by the problem and the conditions that it presents to the person suffering. It's also characterized by a very small and weak representation of the desired state. And when a person is in the problem state of thinking and endures in that state, then she sinks into a negativity and a sense of helplessness that makes performance less and less possible, less and less likely. What we really want is an outcome thinking state, a state in which the representation of what we want is just as strong and as robust and as in high definition as the representation of what we currently have and are discontent with. When that happens, there develops a creative tension between the desired state, the outcome, and the present state. We then move into not a problem thinking state, but an outcome thinking state, in which that creative tension allows us to begin to perceive the path from where we are to where we want to be, allows us to begin to sense the resources that we need to move from where we are to where we want to be, allows us to begin to perceive solutions to our problem. When a person is in an outcome thinking state, they do not need to be supervised, advised, even inspired, because they are in contact with their inner resources. They are connected and they are able to find their own way. But when a person is in a problem thinking state, there is no creative tension due to the fact that you have an undeveloped desired state, an undeveloped representation of the desired state. And so with an overlarge representation of the problem state, you're stuck there without a sense of solutions, without a sense of resources, without a sense of how to strategize and how to get out of where you are. And so our task as coaches is simple, if profound, to get people out of a problem thinking state to a state in which they are outcome thinking, a state in which they are naturally resilient, a state in which they know where they want to go to, they know what they want, they are in contact with their vision. And this brings out the resources, the solutions, the energy, the motivation that they need to get out of their present state. And that is why we use models like the GROW. The goal first, then the reality, the goal being the desired state, and then the reality. And then we nudge people towards their options, and then their resolutions. This is the task of a coach. And in so doing, we bring people to the natural resilience that exists in everybody, but that needs to be cultivated by reconnecting ourselves with the purpose of our lives, the vision of contribution we have, our own desires and ambitions. In other words, everything that goes to filling up the picture of our desired state. And once we can reconnect or maintain connection with our desired state, our highest aspirations, our vision, our ambition, then resilience comes up within us quite naturally and enables us to overcome even the hardest and the most frightening of situations. I want to end this with a reference to a work that I'll recommend for every coach, insofar as you've not come across it. It's by a man called Viktor Frankl, and it's called Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist in Vienna in the 1930s. He was also a Jew. And as a result of being a Jew, he was one of those seized by the Nazis and incarcerated in the death camps. He was in 2 camps, one of which was Auschwitz, which is one of the most notorious of the death camps. And because he was a highly skilled medical practitioner, he was spared from death and used to treat and otherwise work and research with his fellow prisoners. He viewed human nature under the most harrowing, most horrible of circumstances. And he found that the reality of the human condition frequently defied what the textbooks said. He found that people who were suffering from malnutrition sometimes had even better health than before they were suffering from malnutrition. But most of all, he found that the people who tended to survive were the people who had a purpose, be it only to tell the story of the terror of what was happening in those death camps, be it to find a loved one, be it to get vengeance. And the people who most easily succumbed to the horrors and rigors of the death camps were those who lost a sense of purpose. Now, this is a rather stark image to end this conversation with, but it looks like we are in similar times, though fortunately not inflicted directly on us by human agencies. And we need to find our resilience. And we can only help others to resilience if we find it within ourselves. So we need both connection and balance. We need to reconnect with the best, the highest aspirations that we bear within us, with the very best hopes of contributing to the world about us. We need to reconnect with the source of all, with our Creator, our God. And not necessarily through your church or your mosque or what have you, but through your own searching and seeking. Churches and mosques and temples should merely be supporting our own seeking, our own searching for connection. We need to find our way to the very best that we have in our lives. We need to reconnect with friends, with loved ones, and cherish those connections. Water them, make them grow strong, because these are the places we get our strength from. And when we do these things, and we also act with balance, we look after ourselves properly, we look after our environments properly, we work and we rest in balance, then by the sheer power of our example, we will be able to induce the same in our clients and hopefully guide them towards their innate resilience, towards becoming the wonderful creatures that our God, our Lord, has willed us all to be. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I will stop here and welcome any questions or any requests for clarification of what I've said.
Thank you very much, Adi. That was fantastic. We, as coaches, we learned so much. There's so much that you have said, but I think as coaches, you really delved into the word being and doing, connecting and balancing. And I do agree with you that we need to start with ourselves first in order to be able to impact our clients. And we need to bring ourselves into that state of resilience. What really struck me was this being in a coach state, and you actually broke down that word coach, which is really good, really new to me as well. And you talked about it us being centered, being open, being aware, being connected, and the holding as well. And I agree, we definitely need to put our thinking caps on in order for us to be able to move people from that problem state to the outcome state. I really like what you said about all of that. I have so many papers in front of me, but once again, I think all of us have learned from this. I think it's something that we'd love to listen to over and over again, because you did say quite a lot. And we have, I believe many of us, we have been writing some things down. I think a lot of us look forward to listening to it all over again. But the state of being balanced and staying connected to friends, connected to family, connected to our creator, connected to our own highest aspirations. Once we start with ourselves, I think it will definitely impact all the others. And I'm a strong believer too. If you want to be a great coach, you also have to experience the art of being coached as well. So thank you very much for that. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to allow people to ask questions where they would like to ask questions, and so that we don't lose on the time. So people have the opportunity to write questions down the chat box, or please raise your hand, and we can then see who is trying to speak and ask that question. And I think on that note, if you do raise your hand, you unmute yourself, ask the question, and so that Adi can respond. Are we together on that? Hello? Hello?
Yes, we are, Janet.
Okay, excellent.
Thanks.
Good. Thank you. So the floor is open for questions. Since we just have 15 minutes left. Thank you once again, Adi. That was fantastic. A lot of learnings, a lot of teachings, and I think it's extremely apt for the period of crisis time that we're in now. So thank you once again.
You're welcome.
Okay, I noticed that nobody has actually raised their hand yet. We're still waiting on that. Adi, could you just confirm if the slides. I noticed you had some challenge sharing the screen. Will the slides be made available?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, awesome. I also know that Yinka has recorded the session. So I believe that we can, those who actually want to get a copy of that can get in touch with us for more details. Thank you.
So may I ask a question? I can't find the raise hand button on this.
Please go ahead.
Ade, thank you very much. This is TA. So the way some people look at resilience is the fact that you have to brazen up, wear a bulletproof vest, and be as hard as steel. And with what you've said, how will you compare that with the being and doing? So can I still wear my bulletproof vest and be in a state of being? Or if once I wear my bulletproof vest, I'm in a state of doing?
Please, OTT, when bullets are flying, wear your bulletproof vest. Don't ask for permission. Yes.
But I'm just using the bulletproof vest as a metaphor, as
yes.
Well, as a descriptive word, as a way of bracing up. Thank you.
Yes, I quite understand that. And thank you for that question, really. It's important. But true resilience is flexible, not as a habit, but as a continuous strategy. There's a time, as Solomon said, for everything. There's a time to stand firm with your bulletproof vest. There's a time even to run. There's a time to struggle. There's a time to back off politely. True resilience helps us to find what the time is for and enables us to act accordingly. So there is no one prescription for acting from out of resilience. If we are well connected inwardly and to our environment, and we have developed and practiced balance, we will have a sense of rightness of what to do in each occasion, whether to stand firm or to let go, whether to be compassionate and kind or to be firm and strict and hard. Whatever is required of the situation, if we have that balance and if we're focused on our outcome and yet alert to our environment in the right way, we will be able to know what to do when we have to do it.
Thanks, Ade.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Ade. This is Falake Adeni Adele. Thank you again for the presentation, very enlightening. I think this is both a question and a clarification. You talked about balancing the ego and the spirit. And I was just trying to, apply it to these times that we're in, such that, do you then think that the cause of a lot of the anxieties, despite the fact that we may not be in control of the situation, is the lack of the balance between the ego and the spirit? And therefore, how do you balance that?
I do think so. I do think that the anxiety, a lot of the extreme anxiety is as a result of the lack of balance between spirit and ego. And let me explain. Ego is where our sense of self-preservation comes from, you know? And our sense of self-preservation is completely legitimate. It's healthy. We should know when to run. We should know when to duck. We should know when to fight. but it should not become such an overwhelming influence in us that we are in fight or flight mode without knowing which one we should be in or whether we should be in it at all. We can become so anxious about our own private well-being that we're in a constant state of anxiety. That can only be balanced by the sense of spirit, the sense of contribution, the desire to serve, the desire to give. So if we are focused on positive outcomes, if we're focused on the health and well-being of our neighbors, our loved ones, and our own, we will have much less time in which to be anxious, in which to be overwhelmed by anxiety. We will be able to face possibilities, be alert to opportunities, to seal the gaps in our defenses and in the defenses of the well-being of those around us. And so we will not be lost in anxiety. If we think too much of ourselves as individuals, if we're thinking of our own personal well-being all the time, if our interest is too narrow, then we will be anxious, overwhelmed with anxiety. But if it is balanced by a developed sense of community through the spirit, then we will retain our balance. We will be concerned about our own well-being. We will have the instinct of self-preservation up, but it will not overwhelm us. It'll enable, the sense of community will enable us to think and to act in constructive ways. We won't have time to be overwhelmed by anxiety.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Martin. So I see 3 hands up. I see Olubusola, I see Sonny, and I see Jay. So in that order, we'll start with Olubusola. So Olubusola, I'm unmuting you now, so you have the floor.
Good evening, Mr. Martin.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you?
Yeah. Oh, fine, thank you. Yeah, you said something that true resilience is flexible. It will tell you when to run, struggle, or stay. Now, my question is, what if you refuse to settle or connect with an environment you perceive not balanced? And then you take a flight, okay, you fight, and then you take a flight. And then after making your point, you have peace within you. What do you do? Was that a right thing? The spirit within me made me fight and then take a flight. And at the end of the day, well, one way or the other, one is justified. Was that the right thing to do, Mr. Martin?
If you have a sense of peace within you at the end of the day, then I would guess, I mean, that you did the right thing. Anytime I have a sense of peace after a doubtful situation, that to me is an indication that I must have been right to some degree. So I think that you've got to trust your own intuitions, your own feelings. And if you have a genuine sense of peace within you, what better endorsement of your action could you have than that?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olubusola. So, Sonny, you have the floor. I'm unmuting you now. Sonny? Okay, I guess it's not here. Jay, I see your hand. I'm unmuting you now, so you can go ahead and ask your question. Okay, Jay isn't responding either. I see Barbara Lawrence. I see Adara's hand as well. So I'm going to start off with Barbara Lawrence. So I'm unmuting you now, Barbara. What
I
is
think that
happening?
Jay is saying that she responded, but maybe we can't hear her.
Okay.
And the same thing with Sonny. He says we can't hear him. Maybe they have to unmute from their own end.
Okay, I'm unmuting myself now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Barbara.
I can hear you, Barbara.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Ade. Thank you very good presentation. The mindset. So, a client who has a perpetual fixed mindset, how can you help him to build his resilience?
Sorry, Barbara, can you repeat your question because I missed some part of it. I think it's the connection. Yeah.
I said if you have a client whose mindset is fixed and not a growth mindset, how can you help him build his resilience? Because with a fixed mindset, he's never going to see anything positive. He can't move on. He can't go. How do you help him with this resilience?
Right. Well, I think you've got to provide him with some useful evidence of the difference between the two mindsets and help him gently to begin to recognize where he sits in between those two concepts. You see, we all have a mixture of both fixed and growth mindsets. And if we can characterize, if we can describe clearly and simply the difference between the two continuously, repeatedly, then we put ourselves in a position, or we put our client in a position whereby they might be able to recognize themselves in this. Also, it might even be possible for them to even read a book, if you can get them to read a book. I would recommend the book
Carol
Mindset by Carol.
Yeah, by Carol.
Carol Dweck. Mindset.
Yeah.
An excellent book. And I know of the kind of client of which you speak. It takes time to get them to see themselves. But you have to do it gently and help them by explaining those two concepts and how they manifest in daily life. It's something that takes a lot of work. It's slow. It's not something you can do in one session, sit down, look, your problem is you have fixed mindset. You have to change it. That wouldn't work.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
It looks
Okay,
as if
Sonny,
they've written their questions.
So,
okay, I think Sonny, if you're still there, you can ask the question.
okay.
Sorry, Janet, may I suggest, I think Jay has written his or her question on the chat group.
Yeah.
So maybe if you can read it out.
And I think Sonny has written his own too. Okay.
Okay, Jay is a German actually, but she's reading her question out on the chat group.
Okay. So let me read the question out. Jay Edgeman. Okay. Edgeman's question is this. Goes like this. If you had all the HR directors in Nigeria on this chat and they asked the question on how we can help our workforce develop resilience in this new norm of Corona and still stay productive and engaged.
Okay. I would ask them to get coaches. I would ask them to get coaches and have online engagements with their workforce.
Okay.
Thanks, Ade, for that speech. I think this, more than ever before, this is a time where professionals, individuals need coaches and need the support of coaches that are on this platform. This is the time that calls for that, for you to have a coach as that support system, as that ally, as that friend, as that go-to. So, well, sorry, I'm making a sales speech, but the truth is the truth.
It's welcome. It's welcome.
Thank you, TA. I just want to also just, can I go ahead? I hope there's no one in the queue there, just very quickly.
Go ahead.
Really just to speak to a point you made. Thank you. And just to speak to a point you made about looking for the gift, even in the most pleasant experience. Now, I know that these sessions are targeted at coaches in particular, so as to fortify them to be better able to coach their clients. My question is, clients are at different ends of the spectrum. So you may have somebody who is maybe right now in an area where, the coronavirus really, the numbers are growing, and you have somebody else who hasn't really been exposed. So they their level of exposure is different. How does a coach manage a situation that is almost like a war front situation, and an inexperienced coach? And how are they able to still help the coachee look for the gifts, even at this time?
Okay. Well, first of all, the coach must be congruent with what they want to pass on to their clients. The coach must be calm. The coach must have thought through and found for themselves their own gift in the difficulty. And then the coach will, by virtue of that, be able to help the client see their own gift in the circumstances. As I said earlier on, it's very important to get people refocusing on what their outcomes are, on what they really want, on where they would like to be, how they would like to get there. And when you do that, then people can begin to see that it's not all gloom and doom. How it is with the GROW model. When you help people focus properly on their goal, then they can look back from the point of view of their goal to their present state and see that there is something useful in it. So I think we need to avoid being preachy, which is what I guess you might be hinting at, but rather walk that path ourselves. And we should be able to, because we are also in the same experience. We are also faced with a threat to our existence as coaches. So if we are genuinely experiencing the present, and if we are genuinely seeking to connect with the possible future, with what can be done, then we will be in a position to help others gently but surely in the same direction. I don't think there's a formula for it, but if we have the experience of going that way ourselves, we will be able to help others.
Okay, I'd like to ask, there's a question here from Olubusola, and I think in light of that, we're all staying at home now, forced to stay home. A lot of people will be forced to think and rethink and deliberately think even more than they would have. A lot of people are having regrets or looking at, uncertainty, especially for their businesses, for their staff, for monies coming in. And this question is like that. It says, what if my perceived purpose, this is from Olubusola, is not my purpose? So this is going to force a lot of people to be thinking out of the box, within the box, around the box. What should I do now post-corona? And I think a lot of people are going to be stuck in this place of what is their purpose. How, as coaches, can we help such people who are beginning to find themselves in the dilemma of anxiety and fear?
Well, first of all, we have to get them to a quiet place, to get them to the point where they can calm down and really begin to look at the situation. And from the direction I come from in coaching, a lot of that has to do with how we are physically. And so if I were in a coaching session with a person who was deeply bothered by these things, I would, one, build rapport very strongly with them, and then two, help them into a physiology, posture, breathing, whereby they can be calm. Because our moods are always reflected in our bodies. And if we allow our bodies to just express the mood, that bodily expression locks us into the mood. So for instance, if you have depressing circumstances in your life and you're bowed over and your breath is short and your face is in a miserable frown, that will actually strengthen that depressed mood. But if you can be gently helped into a state that reflects a more positive attitude, you'll be amazed at what happens. You'll be amazed at how you can help a person shift the quality of their consciousness by shifting the quality of their posture and their general bodily attitude. So that is where I would tend to work from first. Help them change their state from the state of fear and depression to a state of calm and reflection. Having gotten them into that state, I would then begin with gentle but purposeful questioning to get them to look at what they really want, where they really want to go. And as simple as that sounds, I find that it always works. But if you go straight to asking questions about what you really want and where you want to go, you could very quickly lose your client. So build rapport, even sympathize with them, pace them, and then lead them to a better place. And having got them there, begin to help them turn their vision to their desired future, perhaps to their higher purpose. This is always possible. But, and I remember Olubusala Abidakun's question, if you're already doing things that make you happy now, then you're either living your purpose or you're on your way there. If you're really living a happy life, if you're contributing and you don't know what your purpose is, keep asking what your purpose is. It'll reveal itself. But if you're happy doing what you're doing and it's constructive and beneficial to others, who knows, maybe you're already living a part of your purpose. I hope that's making sense.
Yes, excellent. Thank you. Sorry, Titi Olujobi is asking who is the author. Okay, yes. Somebody has responded.
It's been answered already.
Okay, Viktor Frankl, yeah. Or Carol Dweck.
Carol Dweck.
Yeah, Carol Dweck, yes. Mindset, New Psychology of Success or something like that, by Carol Dweck.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay.
There doesn't seem to be any more hands up.
There are no other questions.
Okay. Adora.
Yes, I'm right here. Thank you, Janet. Thank you very much, Ade. Thank you, Yinka.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's really good.
Okay, so really just say thank you to everyone else who's also taken up time, made up the time to join us on this call. Really appreciate your being here. We would encourage you to send any questions that you have to our email. I believe Yinka will share that. In case it was the question you had and time has run out, we will continue to have these sessions, and we will continue to make ourselves available as coaches to the wider community, especially the HR community, based on the question that was posed earlier. We are focusing at the moment on coaches so that we can better serve our clients. So thank you very much, everyone. I wish us a pleasant evening as we stay safe in the current circumstances. So have a pleasant evening. Thank you, Janet.
I'd like to add that thank you. Thank you very much, Ade. That was extremely enlightening, and we really appreciate your contributions and the fact that we have learned a lot from you. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is the first of the sessions, and we have many more. The next one will be on the 6th of April. That's next Monday. And the topic will be revealed to you all in very short time, and the other topics that are coming as well. We want to use this opportunity also to ask if there are any other topics that you'd like us to have on this webinar session. Please just DM me and let me know so that we can organize more webinar sessions, because we're now going very virtual. And I think let us know how you felt about this session as well, what we could do to improve it more, and what we can do again to enlighten ourselves as coaches during this crisis moment. Thank you all once again, and have a blessed week ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Stay safe.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.